The injustice struck me like a physical blow when I tasted the chalky residue on my tongue. My heart medication, Life Core, had been swapped with sugar pills. My son, David, and his wife Lisa thought I wouldn't notice, but decades of nursing sharpened my senses. They expected me to fade within days, clearing the path to my estate. Today, I began my countermove, feigning frailer breaths each time they hovered near, while secretly pocketing the fake pills as evidence. My goal was simple: confirm the betrayal without alerting them, buying time to plan. The cost was a gnawing loneliness, swallowing the lie that my own flesh and blood wished me dead. David applied pressure by checking in hourly, his voice dripping with false concern as he adjusted my pillow, his eyes scanning for any sign of weakness. A pattern interrupt came when I dropped a pill under the bed. Reaching for it, my fingers brushed against a small, cold object, a hidden microphone tucked into the bed frame. The micro twist. It wasn't just about the pills. They were recording my every word, ensuring I had no allies. My heart hammered, but I smiled weakly, whispering a prayer they'd misinterpret. The cliffhanger. Tonight, I would plant my own device in their kitchen and listen as they counted my remaining hours. From my rocking chair on the sun porch, I watched David and Lisa stroll through the garden, their laughter sharp as broken glass. My goal was to plant a listening device in their kitchen before dusk, turning their surveillance against them. The cost was the strain of moving with deliberate slowness, my joints protesting each step, while masking the fire in my veins. David increased pressure by announcing he'd taken over my pill dispenser, patting my hand as if I were a child. A pattern interrupt occurred when Lisa accidentally spilled water near the outlet I needed, forcing me to divert to the hall closet, where I found a stack of documents. Life insurance policies with my name, dated months ago. The micro twist. They'd insured me for double the estate's value, betting on my swift demise. I slid the bug behind the coffee maker, my hands steady despite the tremor in my soul. The cliffhanger. As I returned to my chair, David's voice crackled from the device in my pocket saying, "She's tougher than we thought. Time for phase 2. The goal was clear: replace their daily vitamins with the stimulating substitute I'd crafted from crushed caffeine pills and herbs, mirroring their deception. Perched on the edge of their bathroom vanity, I unscrewed the vitamin jar, the cost a sour taste of guilt. This wasn't me, but survival had reshaped my morals. Lisa applied pressure by popping in unannounced, her gaze lingering on the sink as she asked if I needed help washing up. A pattern interrupt came when the doorbell rang, a delivery for them, giving me seconds to swap the contents and slip out. Back in my room, I noticed the vitamin label was slightly off. The micro twist. They'd been using a generic brand, but this was a premium one, suggesting they'd upgraded their own health while sabotaging mine. My fingers traced the raised lettering, a silent vow echoing in the stillness. The cliffhanger. Later, I heard Lisa complain of jitters through the bug, and David replied, "Maybe it's stress. She'll be gone soon." Sipping bitter coffee on the veranda, I aimed to monitor their reactions to the tainted vitamins, documenting any changes for leverage. The cost was the hollow ache in my chest, remembering family picnics here, now tainted by their greed. David pressured me by suggesting a doctor's visit, his tone light but eyes hard, testing my compliance. A pattern interrupt. A neighbor's dog bounded into the yard, chasing a squirrel, and in the chaos, I spotted Lisa hastily swallowing a vitamin with water, her hand shaking. The micro twist. She wasn't just taking them, she was doubling the dose, desperate for energy to manage their scheme. I noted the time, the sun casting long shadows like accusations. The cliffhanger. That evening, David found me on the veranda and said, "You're looking pale, Mum. Maybe we should move up the will reading." My goal was to access David's study and find proof of the insurance fraud, using the distraction of their jittery fatigue. The cost was the risk of getting caught, each creak of the floorboards echoing my mortality. Lisa applied pressure by organizing my room, her movements frantic as she searched for something, likely the hidden pills I'd saved. A pattern interrupt. The study door was locked, but I recalled the spare key hidden in a dusty vase, a relic from happier times. Inside, I found not just policies, but emails printed out. They'd discussed accelerating my decline with a specialist. The micro twist. The specialist was a fake, a cover for their own hands-on poisoning. My breath hitched as I pocketed a damning page. The cliffhanger. As I relocked the door, Lisa's shadow fell across the hall, and she called out, "What are you doing up here, Mom?" From the kitchen, I listened through the bug as David argued with Lisa about money, my goal to use their conflict to drive a wedge between them. The cost was the chill of manipulation, staining memories of lullabies and birthday cakes. David pressured me by bringing a new medication, insisting it was stronger, though I knew it was another placebo. A pattern interrupt. The power flickered, killing the lights, and in the dark, I heard Lisa sob, "I can't sleep. Those vitamins are making me hallucinate." The micro twist. She wasn't just anxious. She was seeing things, a side effect I hadn't anticipated. I lit a candle, its glow dancing on my wrinkled hands. The cliffhanger. David's voice cut through the silence on the bug. "Hold it together. One more day, and she's history." My goal was to confront them indirectly, leaving the fake pills where Lisa would find them, signaling I knew. The cost was the weight of silence, biting back words that could unravel everything. David pressured me by hovering as I napped, his breath sour with coffee, counting my shallow breaths. A pattern interrupt. Lisa burst in, accusing him of hiding money, and in the argument, she knocked over my bedside table. The pills scattered, and her eyes widened in recognition. The micro twist. She didn't look guilty. She looked terrified, as if someone else was pulling the strings. I feigned sleep, heart racing. The cliffhanger. Later, through the bug, I heard her whisper, "He knows about the other one. We have to end this now." Settled in the garden shed, I sorted through the evidence, my goal to secure it in a safe place away from the house. The cost was the grime on my hands, a metaphor for the dirt they'd dragged into our lives. David applied pressure by pruning nearby, his shears snapping too close. A not-so-subtle threat. A pattern interrupt. A rainstorm erupted, and as I tucked the documents into a waterproof bag, I noticed a fresh set of fingerprints on the insurance papers. Not David's or Lisa's. The micro twist. A third person was involved, someone with access to the house. I shivered, the damp seeping into my bones. The cliffhanger. The shed door rattled, and a voice I didn't recognize said, "Looking for something, old woman?" My goal was to identify the third party, using the bug to eavesdrop on their meetings. The cost was the erosion of trust, every shadow now a potential enemy. Lisa pressured me by serving tea laced with sedatives, her smile brittle as she watched me pretend to sip. A pattern interrupt. David's phone rang, and he stepped outside. But the bug picked up his conversation. He mentioned the lawyer and cleaning up loose ends. The micro twist. The lawyer was the same one who drafted my will, collaborating with them for a cut. I set down the teacup, my resolve hardening. The cliffhanger. That night, I saw a car I didn't recognize park down the street, and a figure approached the house with a determined stride. From the veranda, I drank coffee, my goal to act normal while preparing to expose them all at the will reading tomorrow. The cost was the bitter brew on my tongue, a reminder of the lies I'd swallowed. David pressured me by outlining funeral plans, his voice casual as he described the flowers. A pattern interrupt. Lisa stumbled out, her face pale, and vomited into the bushes, the vitamin's effects worsening. As David rushed to her, I noticed a slip of paper fall from his pocket, a receipt for a large cash withdrawal. The micro twist. He wasn't just spending on themselves, he'd paid off the lawyer in advance. I pocketed the receipt, the paper crisp against my skin, the cliffhanger. David turned back, his eyes locking with mine, and said, "You've been quiet, Mom, almost like you're planning something." David's suspicion hung in the veranda air like a poison fog, his eyes drilling into me as I clutched my coffee cup. The injustice was his outright accusation, veiled as concern, that I might be scheming against them, the very people plotting my death. Today, I had to reinforce my facade of weakness before he dug deeper. I let my hand tremble, spilling coffee on the table, and mumbled about old age, watching his expression shift from doubt to pity. My goal was to cement his belief in my decline, buying hours to solidify my evidence against them. The cost was the acid burn of humiliation, playing the helpless matriarch while my mind raced with strategies. David applied pressure by pulling up a chair, his voice soft but insistent as he probed about my plans, mentioning the will reading tomorrow with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A pattern interrupt came when Lisa staggered out, her face slick with sweat, and collapsed into a lounge chair, the tainted vitamins clearly taking a toll. As David rushed to her side, I overheard a snippet from the bug in my pocket, a whispered argument about moving the money sooner. The micro twist. They weren't just after the estate. They'd already started liquidating assets in my name. I wiped the spill, my fingers cold against the porcelain, and feigned a coughing fit, the cliffhanger. David turned back to me, his pity gone, and said, "We're having a family meeting tonight. No excuses." From the dimness of my bedroom, I listened through the bug as David and Lisa argued in the kitchen, my goal to record their admissions for the lawyer. The injustice was their casual discussion of my imminent passing, as if I were already a ghost. Tonight, I needed to capture proof before the family meeting. The cost was the hollow ache in my chest, mourning the son I once knew. Lisa pressured me by bringing a special tea to calm my nerves, her hands shaking as she set it down, a sign the vitamins were eroding her composure. A pattern interrupt. The doorbell chimed, and through the window, I saw the lawyer, Mr. Evans, arrive early, his briefcase clutched tight. David greeted him with a hushed urgency, and they moved to the study, but the bug picked up Lisa, muttering, "He can't know about the other accounts." The micro twist. There were hidden accounts beyond the estate, and Mr. Evans was involved in hiding them. I sipped the tea, bitter and likely drugged, but spat it into a tissue when alone. The cliffhanger. As I adjusted the bug, David's voice echoed, "Mum, come downstairs. We need to talk about your health. Now." Seated in the living room, surrounded by their false concern, my goal was to survive the family meeting without revealing my knowledge. The injustice was their united front, painting me as confused while they outlined care plans that sounded like a death sentence. I had to endure this charade until midnight, when I could access David's computer. The cost was the weight of their lies, pressing down like a tombstone. Mr. Evans applied pressure by nodding along, his legal jargon masking the theft, while Lisa's jittery movements betrayed her guilt. A pattern interrupt. The power went out. A storm had knocked a tree limb onto the lines, and in the candle-lit darkness, I heard David curse and Lisa whimper about being watched. As they fumbled for flashlights, I slipped a small recorder from my pocket and activated it. The micro-twist. Mr. Evans wasn't just the lawyer. He was Lisa's distant relative, explaining their tight bond. I pocketed the recorder, my breath shallow. The cliffhanger. When the lights flickered back on, David was staring at my chair, and he said, "You're too calm, Mum. What aren't you telling us?" Back on the veranda, the night air cool against my skin, my goal was to retrieve the evidence from the shed before David searched it. The injustice was their assumption I'd fold under pressure, but I'd outlived harder times. I had to move in the next hour, under cover of darkness. The cost was the risk of exposure, each shadow holding potential danger. Lisa pressured me by insisting I stay inside for safety, her voice shrill as she paced nearby. A pattern interrupt. A neighbor's security light flashed on, illuminating the yard, and I saw David heading toward the shed with a determined stride. Ducking behind a bush, I watched him fumble with the lock, but he gave up and returned to the house. The micro-twist. He didn't have the key. He'd broken the lock earlier, meaning he'd already been inside. I waited until the coast was clear, then crept to the shed, the damp grass soaking my slippers. The cliffhanger. Inside, I found the evidence bag untouched, but a note was pinned to it. "I know what you're doing. Stop, or else." In the kitchen at dawn, I boiled water for tea, my goal to analyze the note and identify who left it. The injustice was the anonymous threat, implying I had an enemy beyond David and Lisa. Today, I needed to uncover this third player before the will reading. The cost was the sleepless night, my eyes gritty with fatigue. David applied pressure by entering with a false cheer, announcing he'd sorted the shed and found nothing important, his gaze lingering on me. A pattern interrupt. Lisa dropped a plate, the shards scattering, and as she cleaned up, I noticed a familiar handwriting on a grocery list. It matched the note. The micro-twist. Lisa was the one who left the threat, but her hand was unsteady, suggesting fear, not malice. I offered to help, my fingers brushing against a sharp fragment, a tactile reminder of the broken trust. The cliffhanger. David pulled me aside, his voice low. "The will reading is at noon. Don't cause a scene, or things will get ugly." Huddled in the hall closet, I reviewed the recorded conversations, my goal to transfer them to a secure device before the meeting. The injustice was hearing my son call me a burden on the recordings, his voice cold. I had until 11 a.m. to back up the files. The cost was the stifling air in the closet, each breath a reminder of my isolation. Mr. Evans pressured me by knocking on the front door early, his voice booming as he asked for the documents. A pattern interrupt. My old friend Martha called, wondering why I'd missed our weekly chat, and I had to invent an excuse while hiding the recorder. As we spoke, I heard David and Lisa arguing in the background. Lisa wanted to call off the scheme, but David insisted it was too late. The micro-twist. David had debts I never knew about, driving his desperation. I ended the call, my heart heavy, and slid the files into a hidden USB drive. The cliffhanger. As I opened the closet door, Mr. Evans stood there, smiling. "Looking for something?" he said. From the study, where I'd been invited to wait. My goal was to plant a second bug on Mr. Evans's briefcase. The injustice was his patronizing tone as he discussed my fragile state with David. I had to act before they finalized their plans. The cost was the chill of the leather chair seeping into my bones. Lisa applied pressure by bringing me water, her eyes red-rimmed, and whispering, "Just sign whatever they ask." A pattern interrupt. David's phone rang with an urgent call from his bank, and he stepped out, leaving the briefcase unattended. I slipped the bug inside a compartment, my movements swift and silent. The micro-twist. The briefcase contained not just documents, but a pre-signed death certificate with my name. My blood ran cold at the sight. The cliffhanger. David returned, his face pale, and said, "There's a problem with the accounts. Someone been accessing them?" On the veranda again, I sipped water, my goal to use the new bug to listen in on Mr. Evans's private conversations. The injustice was the death certificate, a blatant step toward murder. I needed to gather enough to go to the authorities by evening. The cost was the sun's glare, highlighting every wrinkle of my age. David pressured me by pacing nearby, muttering about loose ends and silencing rumors. A pattern interrupt. A delivery van arrived with a package for Mr. Evans, and as he signed for it, I heard him say into his phone, "The old lady's onto us. Clean up the traces." Through the bug, I caught the response. "What about the son? He's unstable." The micro-twist. Mr. Evans was manipulating David too, planning to pin everything on him. I noted the van's logo, a local courier, and the time, the cliffhanger. Lisa approached me, her hands trembling, and pressed a key into my palm. "Run," she whispered, before David called her away. In the bathroom, lock clicked shut. I examined the key. It was for a safety deposit box Lisa mentioned once. My goal was to reach the bank before it closed at 5 p.m. and see what she hid. The injustice was Lisa's sudden help, a twist in their crumbling alliance. The cost was the racing pulse in my throat, fear and hope warring. David applied pressure by jiggling the doorknob, demanding I come out for the final discussion. A pattern interrupt. The house phone rang, and I heard Mr. Evans answer, his voice tense as he spoke to someone named Detective. As David moved away, I unlocked the window and climbed out into the side yard, the grass cool under my bare feet. The micro-twist. The safety deposit box was in my name, set up years ago by my late husband, and Lisa had access. I tucked the key into my sleeve, breath fogging in the air. The cliffhanger. As I reached the gate, David spotted me from the window, his shout cutting through the quiet. "She's escaping!" Dashing down the street, my slippers slapping against pavement. My goal was to reach the bank 2 blocks away and secure the box's contents. The injustice was being chased like a criminal by my own son, his shouts drawing neighbors' stares. I had minutes before he caught up. The cost was the burn in my lungs, a reminder I wasn't as young as I used to be. David applied pressure by following in his car, slowing beside me, his window down as he pleaded, "Mum, get in. We can talk this out." A pattern interrupt. A police car turned the corner, responding to a noise complaint, and David sped off to avoid attention. I ducked into an alley, catching my breath, and saw the bank ahead. The micro-twist. The safety deposit box key had a tag with a number I recognized. It matched an old journal of mine, hinting at hidden funds. I hurried forward, my hands shaking. The cliffhanger. As I entered the bank, the manager greeted me, but over his shoulder, I saw Mr. Evans walking through the door, his eyes locking with mine. The injustice was Mr. Evans's smug presence in the bank lobby, his eyes pinning me like a specimen as I stood frozen by the manager's desk. He thought he could corner me here, but I had minutes before he closed in, and I needed to access that safety deposit box now. I straightened my spine, pasting on a confused old woman's smile, and told the manager I was here for my quarterly check, a lie I'd used before. My goal was to get into the box and secure whatever Lisa had hinted at, using the key clutched in my sweaty palm. The cost was the raw fear clawing at my throat, turning my voice reedy as I spoke. Mr. Evans applied pressure by stepping closer, his tone oily as he greeted the manager by name and mentioned family business that needed urgent attention. A pattern interrupt. The bank's alarm system blared briefly, a false trigger from a faulty sensor, and in the sudden chaos, the manager hurried off to check, leaving me alone with Mr. Evans for a heartbeat. I seized the moment to slide the key toward the counter, but Evans leaned in, his whisper cold. The micro twist. He knew about the box and its contents, a ledger from my late husband detailing hidden investments they'd been siphoning. My fingers trembled as I palmed the key back, the metal biting into my skin. The cliffhanger. The manager returned, apologizing, but Mr. Evans smiled and said, "Let's handle this together, shall we? I have the authorization." From the sterile privacy of the safety deposit room, my goal was to open the box and photograph the ledger before Mr. Evans could interfere. The injustice was his claim of authorization, a blatant lie to control the narrative. I had to act in the 5 minutes the manager allotted us. The cost was the chill of the metal box under my hands, a reminder of how trust had corroded. Mr. Evans pressured me by standing too close, his breath minty as he murmured about avoiding scandals and protecting the family name. A pattern interrupt. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust Evans. He works for others." And I fumbled, dropping the key. As I bent to retrieve it, I noticed a tiny scratch on the box's lock, signs of forced entry. The micro twist? Someone had already been inside, likely David or Evans, but the ledger was still there, untouched, with a new note tucked in. "For emergencies, use wisely." I snapped photos with my phone, my heart thudding. The cliffhanger. Evans's hand closed over mine, and he said, "Give me the phone, or I'll call security for theft." Back in the bank lobby, the goal was to escape with the photos and evidence, leveraging the crowd for cover. The injustice was Evans's threat, treating me like a common criminal in a place I'd banked at for decades. I had to reach the exit before he made good on his word. The cost was the humiliation of public scrutiny, faces turning toward us. Lisa applied pressure by calling my phone repeatedly, her calls going to voicemail, each ring a reminder of her divided loyalties. A pattern interrupt. A group of schoolchildren on a tour flooded the lobby, their chatter and movement creating a diversion. I slipped behind them, toward the door, but Evans followed, his voice rising over the noise. The micro twist. The unknown number texted again. "Meet at the park bench, Martha," implying my old friend was involved. But why? I pushed through the glass doors, the sun blinding me momentarily. The cliffhanger. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, David's car screeched to a halt nearby, and he jumped out, his face twisted in rage. Dashing into a nearby cafe, I slid into a booth, my goal to review the ledger photos and contact Martha for help. The injustice was being hunted by my own son, his rage a weapon aimed at my heart. I needed to make sense of the ledger before they found me. The cost was the bitter coffee I ordered as a cover, its taste mirroring the betrayal. David pressured me by circling the block in his car, his silhouette visible through the window, a predator waiting. A pattern interrupt. The cafe's TV news flashed a report about financial fraud in our town, and I saw Mr. Evans's face briefly. He was under investigation for other schemes. The micro twist. The ledger showed not just siphoning, but payments to an offshore account in David's name, dating back years. My hands shook as I zoomed in on the details, the numbers blurring. The cliffhanger. My phone rang. It was Martha, her voice urgent. "They know about the park. Don't go there. I'm sending help to your location." Huddled in the cafe bathroom, lock engaged, my goal was to send the evidence to a secure email before David or Evans tracked me down. The injustice was the depth of David's deception, his secret accounts revealing a life of hidden debts. I had to act in the next 10 minutes, while Martha's help was en route. The cost was the claustrophobic stall, the smell of disinfectant choking me. Evans applied pressure by calling the cafe's landline, asking if an elderly woman was there, his voice calm but threatening. A pattern interrupt. A janitor knocked, needing to restock supplies, and I had to exit, pretending to wash my hands. As I did, I overheard two baristas discussing a disturbed man outside, David arguing with a passerby. The micro twist. The offshore account was linked to a business partner of Evans's, someone with ties to organized crime. I finished sending the files, my thumb hovering over the send button. The cliffhanger. The bathroom door rattled, and David's voice growled. "Mum, I know you're in there. Open up, or I'll break it down." Slipping out the cafe's back door into an alley, my goal was to reach the rendezvous point Martha specified, a bus stop 2 blocks away. The injustice was David's violence, his willingness to break down doors for money. I had to move quickly, using the alley's shadows for cover. The cost was the grime on my clothes, a physical stain from this moral quagmire. Lisa pressured me by sending a flurry of texts. "I'm sorry. He's gone mad. They'll hurt you." A pattern interrupt. A stray cat darted out, knocking over a trash can, and the noise drew David's attention from the front. I ducked behind a dumpster, my breath fogging in the cool air. The micro twist. Lisa's texts included a photo of David's car GPS, showing he'd been visiting a warehouse on the outskirts, likely where they stored stolen assets. I noted the address, my mind racing. The cliffhanger. As I reached the bus stop, a van pulled up, and Mr. Evans stepped out smiling. "Going somewhere?" he said. From the bus stop bench, my goal was to stall Evans until Martha's help arrived, using the ledger as a bargaining chip. The injustice was his calm dominance, as if my life were a game he'd already won. I had to hold him off for 5 more minutes. The cost was the cold metal of the bench seeping through my thin dress, a reminder of my vulnerability. Evans applied pressure by leaning in, his voice low as he offered a deal. Drop the evidence, and he'd ensure David left me alone. A pattern interrupt. A bus arrived, its doors hissing open, and passengers disembarked, creating a buffer. I stood, pretending to board, but Evans grabbed my arm. The micro twist. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was David's silent partner in the debts, and the offshore account was their joint escape plan. I yanked free, my pulse roaring. The cliffhanger. A car screeched to a halt, Martha's, and she yelled, "Get in!" But Evans lunged for me. Inside Martha's car, speeding away, my goal was to explain the situation and plan our next move to the police. The injustice was Evans's reach, extending even into my friendships, but Martha's fierce loyalty was a shield. I had to reach the station before they intercepted us. The cost was the guilt of dragging Martha into this, her knuckles white on the wheel. David applied pressure by following in his car, his headlights glaring in the rearview mirror, horn blaring. A pattern interrupt. A traffic light turned red, and we stopped. But David rammed us from behind, jolting the car. Martha cursed, swerving into a side street. The micro twist. Martha revealed she'd been investigating Evans for months, suspecting he'd ruined her brother's business, and my evidence was the key. I clutched the door handle, the impact ringing in my ears. The cliffhanger. As we rounded a corner, a police car appeared ahead, lights flashing, and David's car skidded to a stop behind us. Pulled over by the police, my goal was to hand over the evidence and secure protection, ending this nightmare. The injustice was David's desperate violence, reducing our family to a crime scene. I had to speak clearly and quickly before he spun lies. The cost was the exhaustion weighing me down, every word an effort. Evans pressured me by arriving on foot, his lawyerly demeanour intact as he approached the officers, claiming I was confused and a danger to myself. A pattern interrupt. One officer recognised Evans from the fraud report on TV and called for backup. In the confusion, I handed my phone to the officer, the ledger photos displayed. The micro twist. The photos included timestamps proving Evans and David's recent accesses, contradicting their alibis. The officer's expression shifted from skepticism to alertness. The cliffhanger. As Evans was questioned, David broke free and ran toward me, shouting, "You've ruined everything!" In the back of the police car, en route to the station, my goal was to ensure the evidence was logged and I was safe for the night. The injustice was David's outburst, a final admission of guilt that echoed in the silent car. I had to hold on until we reached safety. The cost was the numbness spreading through me, the aftermath of adrenaline. Lisa applied pressure by calling the officer's phone, sobbing that David was not himself, begging me to recant. A pattern interrupt. The car's radio crackled with a report of a fire at my house, likely set to destroy evidence, and we detoured to assess. Through the window, I saw flames licking the veranda where I'd drunk coffee just days ago. The micro twist. The fire department found accelerants traced to Evans's car, implicating him directly. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering. The cliffhanger. At the station, the lead detective sat across from me and said, "Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out." The injustice was the detective's skeptical gaze, his pen poised as if my life were a story to be dissected, while my son's betrayal burned fresh in my memory. Today, I had to narrate the entire saga without breaking, ensuring the evidence spoke louder than Evans's lies. I began with the chalky taste of the fake pills, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, detailing David's hourly check-ins and Lisa's jittery collapse. My goal was to secure police protection and formal charges, turning their greed into their downfall. The cost was the raw exposure, laying bare family shame to a stranger. Evans applied pressure by sending a junior lawyer to the station, who interrupted with claims of my mental decline and demanded a medical evaluation. A pattern interrupt. Martha arrived with a folder of her own findings, emails between Evans and David discussing asset liquidation, which she'd obtained through a private contact. The micro twist. The emails referenced a third party, a shadowy figure named the benefactor, who was funding their scheme in exchange for a cut. I handed over my phone with the ledger photos, the detective's eyes widening at the offshore accounts. The cliffhanger. As he nodded, ready to act, his radio buzzed with news that David had been spotted near the station, armed and agitated. From the interview room's cold chair, my goal was to provide every detail to solidify the case, while officers scrambled to locate David. The injustice was being treated as a witness in my own attempted murder, my age making me seem fragile. I had to emphasize the premeditation, the hidden microphone, the death certificate, before Evans's lawyer could sow doubt. The cost was the fatigue clawing at me, each word a battle. Lisa applied pressure by calling the station again, her voice breaking as she confessed to swapping the pills but blamed David's debts, begging for leniency. A pattern interrupt. A forensic tech entered, reporting that the fire at my house was arson, with traces of Evans's DNA on a gas can found nearby. The micro twist. The tech also found a burned ledger page in the debris, matching my photos, but with an added entry, a payment to the benefactor from months ago. I shivered, the room's air conditioning biting into my skin. The cliffhanger. The detective received a call. David had barricaded himself in a warehouse, and hostages were involved. Relocated to a safe room in the station, my goal was to assist the hostage negotiation by revealing David's vulnerabilities, like his fear of failure. The injustice was his descent into violence, using innocence as shields for his crimes. I had to help end this without more bloodshed. The cost was the guilt that I'd driven my son to this, however justified my actions. Evans pressured me by having his lawyer circulate a document alleging I'd manipulated the evidence, citing my history of paranoia. A pattern interrupt. Martha slipped me a note. She'd tracked the benefactor to a shell company and believed it was someone from my late husband's past. As I read it, the negotiator patched in David's voice, hoarse and desperate. The micro twist. David wasn't alone. Lisa was with him, and she was the one pleading for calm, revealing she'd been coerced into the scheme. I gripped the table, the wood smooth and cold. The cliffhanger. David shouted, "I'm not going to jail for her!" And a gunshot echoed through the phone line. Crouched in the safe room, the goal was to stay calm and provide insights to the police, using my knowledge of David's habits to predict his moves. The injustice was the chaos he'd unleashed, turning a family rift into a public crisis. I needed to ensure Lisa's safety if she was truly a victim. The cost was the hollow ache in my chest, mourning the son I'd lost long before today. The police applied pressure by urging quick answers, their voices tense as the warehouse standoff escalated. A pattern interrupt. An officer rushed in with news. The warehouse was owned by Evans's shell company, and blueprints showed hidden rooms used for storing stolen assets. The micro twist. Lisa had secretly activated a GPS tracker on her phone, broadcasting their location to us, and she'd hidden a key piece of evidence there, a voice recorder with Evans admitting to the plot. I relayed this, my throat dry. The cliffhanger. The negotiator reported David was wounded but stable, and Lisa was negotiating their surrender. But Evans was en route to the warehouse. From the station's monitoring room, my goal was to guide the police to the hidden evidence in the warehouse before Evans destroyed it. The injustice was Evans's relentless pursuit, his legal mask slipping to reveal a predator. I had to use the blueprints and Lisa's clues to pinpoint the stash. The cost was the strain of focusing, while worry for Lisa gnawed at me. Evans applied pressure by arriving at the warehouse with a team of associates, claiming he was there to mediate. But the police suspected he was there to clean up. A pattern interrupt. A power outage hit the warehouse district, and in the dark, Lisa's GPS signal flickered. But she'd memorized the layout and described a false wall in the office. The micro twist. The hidden room contained not just assets, but files on other victims Evans had exploited, tying him to a larger ring. I directed the SWAT team, my voice firm. The cliffhanger. As they breached the wall, Evans's voice crackled over the radio. Too late. I've already moved the prize. Back in the safe room, the goal was to decode Evans's taunt. What prize had he moved? And where? The injustice was his arrogance, treating lives as chess pieces. I had to piece together clues from the ledger and Martha's research before he vanished. The cost was the mental exhaustion, each thought a slog through fog. David applied pressure from his hospital bed under guard, ranting about the benefactor saving him, but his words were slurred from painkillers. A pattern interrupt. Martha called with a breakthrough. The shell company was linked to a retired judge from my husband's era, someone who'd owed Evans favours. The micro twist. The prize was a digital ledger stored on a secure server, and Evans had triggered a failsafe to erase it in hours unless stopped. I provided the judge's name to the police, my hands trembling. The cliffhanger. The detective confirmed the judge was found dead, an apparent suicide, with a note implicating me as the mastermind. Seated with a victim advocate, my goal was to disprove the judge's note by alibis and evidence, clearing my name before the narrative hardened. The injustice was the posthumous frame-up, using a dead man's words to silence me. I had to collaborate with Martha to find digital backups of the ledger. The cost was the sinking feeling that no one would believe a grandmother over a judge's testament. Evans pressured me by leaking the note to the media, and news vans gathered outside the station, their lights piercing the windows. A pattern interrupt. Lisa, now in protective custody, sent a message through her lawyer. She'd hidden a copy of the digital ledger on a cloud drive, and the password was my late husband's birthday. The micro twist. The drive also contained emails showing the judge was blackmailed by Evans into compliance. I recited the password to the tech team, the numbers familiar from decades of memories. The cliffhanger. As they accessed the drive, an alert flashed. The files were booby-trapped, and downloading them would trigger a wipe. In the tech lab, surrounded by humming servers, my goal was to help the experts bypass the trap and secure the evidence without triggering it. The injustice was Evans's technological web, designed to erase his crimes from afar. I had to recall any hints from my husband about digital security. He'd been cautious with data. The cost was the pressure of time, the clock ticking down to the failsafe. Evans applied pressure by filing a motion to dismiss the case, citing the judge's note and lack of concrete proof. A pattern interrupt. The tech lead discovered the trap was tied to a physical device, a router in Evans's office, and needed to be disabled on site. The micro twist. The router's location was listed in the ledger, and it was the same one I'd bugged days earlier, still active. I guided them to the office address, my memory sharp. The cliffhanger. As a team moved to raid the office, Evans called the station, threatening to release damaging photos of me if I didn't stand down. Huddled with the detective, my goal was to call Evans's bluff. What photos could he have? And were they real? The injustice was his invasion of my privacy, digging for anything to discredit me. I had to stay resolved, trusting the evidence we had. The cost was the fear of humiliation, my life laid bare for gossip. Martha applied pressure by urging caution, her voice tight as she reviewed old albums for anything incriminating. A pattern interrupt. The raid team reported the router was gone. Evans had moved it. But they found a hidden safe with photos of me from years ago, innocuous but timed to suggest instability. The micro twist. The photos were dated after my husband's death, when I'd been vulnerable, and Evans had doctored them to show me acting erratic. I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the room. The cliffhanger. The tech team intercepted a signal. The digital ledger was being uploaded to a dark web auction, and the highest bidder would get it in minutes. From the command center, my goal was to aid the cyber unit in tracking the auction and shutting it down before the ledger sold. The injustice was Evans's final gamble, monetizing our family's destruction. I had to use every detail from the ledger to identify the server location. The cost was the surreal disconnect, watching my life become a digital commodity. David, from custody, pressured me by sending a message through his lawyer. He'd reveal the benefactor if I dropped the charges. A last-ditch deal. A pattern interrupt. The auction site was hosted on a server linked to Martha's brother's old business, and she provided access codes from her investigation. The micro twist. The benefactor was Evans himself, using the alias to control David and skim profits, and the auction was a ruse to draw us out. I relayed this, the pieces clicking into place. The cliffhanger. As the cyber unit closed in, Evans's face appeared on a monitor. He'd hacked the station's system, and his voice hissed, "Check your phone, Grace, you're out of time." The injustice was Evans's voice hissing from the monitor, his digital invasion turning the police station into his playground, while my own phone felt like a bomb in my hand. He'd given me seconds to check it, implying imminent danger, and I had to act before his threat materialized. I fumbled for the device, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline, and saw a text with a link. A live feed showing my granddaughter's school, its playground visible in real time. My goal was to neutralize this threat without causing panic, ensuring her safety while keeping the police focused on Evans. The cost was the icy fear slithering down my spine, the image of her innocent face amplifying every risk. Evans applied pressure by broadcasting his voice through the station's speakers, mocking our efforts and demanding I publicly recant my statements or face the consequences. A pattern interrupt. The cyber unit leader slammed a hand on the console, cutting the audio feed, and revealed they'd traced Evans's signal to a nearby cell tower. He was close, possibly in a van outside. As they mobilized, I noticed the live feed had a timestamp looping. It was recorded footage, not live, meant to deceive us. The micro twist. Evans had no real access to my granddaughter. The school had upgraded its security weeks ago after a scare, something he'd overlooked in his haste. I relayed this, my voice steadier now, and the detective nodded, redirecting teams. The cliffhanger. As I set down the phone, it buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. The ledger is gone. So is your leverage. Check the news. From the command center's glare, my goal was to verify the news alert and prevent Evans from erasing the digital ledger permanently. The injustice was his taunt, leveraging media to spread chaos while he covered his tracks. I had to work with the cyber unit to locate the backup servers before the auction concluded. The cost was the exhaustion weighing me down, each breath an effort to stay sharp. Evans applied pressure by having an associate call the station, claiming I had a history of mental instability and presenting forged medical records from years ago. A pattern interrupt. Martha burst in, her face flushed, holding a tablet. She'd used her contacts to access the dark web auction and saw the ledger was being bid on by multiple parties, but the countdown had paused due to a technical glitch. The micro twist. The glitch was caused by Lisa, who'd secretly embedded a virus in the ledger files when she hid them, buying us time. I provided Lisa's known tech habits to the unit, the details flowing from memory. The cliffhanger. The news alert flashed on a screen. Evans had released an edited video of me confessing to fraud, and it was going viral. Seated before a recording device, my goal was to issue a counterstatement to the police, debunking Evans's video with evidence of its manipulation. The injustice was the fabricated confession, using old footage of me stressed after my husband's death to paint me as unstable. I had to act within the hour before public opinion hardened against me. The cost was the humiliation of defending my sanity to strangers, a private grief made spectacle. Evans applied pressure by coordinating bot networks to amplify the video online, flooding social media with demands for my arrest. A pattern interrupt. The cyber unit intercepted a packet from Evans's server, a copy of the unedited ledger, sent to a secure police archive before the auction resumed. The micro-twist. The ledger included transactions showing Evans had embezzled from other clients, not just me, widening the case beyond our family. I dictated a brief statement, my words measured, and handed over documents proving the video's edits. The cliffhanger. As the detective approved its release, an officer rushed in. Evans had been spotted near the station's backup generator, and power was failing. In the dim emergency lighting, my goal was to help secure the generator area and ensure the evidence servers remained online. The injustice was Evans's physical breach, turning a sanctuary into a battlefield. I had to guide the team using my knowledge of the station's layout from past visits. The cost was the strain of moving in near darkness, my age a liability in the chaos. Evans applied pressure by triggering fire alarms, creating confusion and diverting resources, his voice occasionally crackling over compromised comms with taunts. A pattern interrupt. A K9 unit, brought in for search, picked up Evans's scent and led officers to a vent shaft. He'd been hiding in the building for hours. The micro-twist. The vent led to a server room where the ledger backup was stored, and Evans had planted a physical device to destroy it if removed. I described the device's likely appearance based on his past tricks, my memory of his meticulous nature sharp. The cliffhanger. As they disarmed it, Evans emerged from the shadows, holding a remote detonator. "One move, and it all goes up," he said. Frozen in the server room's cool air, my goal was to talk Evans down, using his ego against him to delay until backup arrived. The injustice was his smug dominance, treating lives and data as disposable. I had to keep him engaged for 5 minutes, the estimated time for SWAT to position. The cost was the raw fear, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Evans applied pressure by thumbing the detonator, his eyes gleaming as he listed his demands: immunity, access to funds, and my silence. A pattern interrupt. Lisa's voice echoed from a nearby speaker. She'd patched in from custody, pleading with Evans to stop, revealing he'd promised her a share but never intended to pay. The micro-twist. Evans had recorded their conversations too, and he played a snippet where Lisa admitted initial willingness, shocking her into silence. I stepped forward, my voice low, reminding him of the judge's death and how it tied to him. The cliffhanger. Evans laughed, but his hand trembled, and the detonator slipped, hitting the floor with a dull clack. From the floor, where the detonator lay inert, my goal was to secure Evans before he recovered, aiding the police in his arrest. The injustice was his near success, the close call leaving me shaking. I had to ensure the ledger and other evidence were safe now that the immediate threat was neutralized. The cost was the adrenaline crash, my limbs heavy and unresponsive. Evans applied pressure by scrambling for the detonator, shouting that he had contingencies and allies who would finish the job if he fell. A pattern interrupt. The SWAT team breached the room, their flashlights blinding, and in the scuffle, Evans bit an officer's arm, trying to flee. The micro-twist. The bite left DNA that matched samples from the fire at my house, solidifying his arson charge. I pointed to the server rack, where the ledger was stored, and an officer secured it. The cliffhanger. As Evans was cuffed, he spat. "The benefactor isn't me, it's someone you trust," and nodded toward Martha. Back in the interrogation room, my goal was to confront Martha about Evans's claim, testing her loyalty without accusing her outright. The injustice was the seed of doubt he'd planted, threatening the one friendship I had left. I had to hear her side before making judgments. The cost was the sickening twist in my gut, the possibility of another betrayal. Evans applied pressure from his cell, sending messages through his lawyer that Martha had provided him with insider info on my habits. A pattern interrupt. Martha produced her own recording, a conversation with Evans where he tried to recruit her, and she refused, gathering evidence instead. The micro-twist. She'd been working with the police all along, undercover, to bring Evans down for her brother's ruin. I listened, the relief warring with shame for doubting her. The cliffhanger. The detective entered, holding a file. Evans had just confessed to the judge's murder, but claimed Martha knew about it in advance. Seated across from Martha in a private room, my goal was to get the truth about the judge's death, balancing trust with the need for clarity. The injustice was Evans's manipulation, turning allies into suspects. I had to resolve this before the case went to trial. The cost was the emotional toll, the friendship strained to its limits. Evans applied pressure by leaking parts of his confession to the media, painting Martha as an accomplice. A pattern interrupt. Martha's lawyer arrived with time-stamped emails showing she'd warned the police about the judge's vulnerability weeks before the death. The micro-twist. Evans had killed the judge to silence him, but Martha had tried to prevent it, going to authorities who didn't act fast enough. I hugged her, the simple gesture easing years of tension. The cliffhanger. As we parted, an officer notified us. David had attempted suicide in his cell and was in critical condition. From the hospital waiting room, my goal was to decide whether to see David, balancing maternal instinct with the reality of his actions. The injustice was his self-destruction, a final act of violence that left me grappling with guilt and grief. I had to make a choice in the next hour, before they moved him. The cost was the hollow ache, the memories of his childhood clashing with his crimes. Lisa applied pressure by calling, sobbing that David had left a note blaming me for everything, and she begged me to forgive him. A pattern interrupt. The doctor emerged, reporting David was stable but unconscious, and they'd found a hidden pill, one of the placebos he'd given me, a symbolic gesture. The micro-twist. The note wasn't just blame. It contained an apology and the location of more hidden assets, a twisted attempt at amends. I stood, the vinyl chair creaking under me, and weighed my options. The cliffhanger. As I stepped toward his room, Evans's lawyer approached, offering a deal: testify against Evans, and David's sentence might be reduced. In the sterile hospital corridor, my goal was to evaluate the deal without letting emotion cloud judgment, ensuring justice was served for all victims. The injustice was the legal maneuvering, reducing lives to bargaining chips. I had to consult with the prosecutor and Martha before responding. The cost was the fatigue of endless decisions, each one carving deeper into my soul. Evans applied pressure by sending a message that he'd expose everyone if I testified, implying wider corruption. A pattern interrupt. Martha joined me, handing over a file, the completed investigation into Evans's ring, showing he'd implicated several officials, including one in the police department. The micro-twist. The official was the detective initially skeptical of me, explaining his resistance. and he was now under internal review. I sighed, the weight of the system pressing down, and agreed to testify, but refused any deal for David. He needed to face his choices. The cliffhanger. As I left the hospital, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face, asking, "Do you feel responsible for your son's condition?" The reporter's microphone felt like a weapon aimed at my heart. Her question, "Do you feel responsible for your son's condition?" echoing the very guilt I'd battled since this nightmare began. The injustice was her presumption, reducing a complex tragedy to a soundbite for public consumption. Today, I had to navigate this media circus without crumbling, shielding myself from further scrutiny while preparing for the upcoming trial. I turned away, my silence a shield, and pushed through the hospital doors into the crisp morning air, my goal clear: to draft a statement that honored the truth without fueling the frenzy. The cost was the weight of unspoken grief, each step heavy with the memory of David's childhood laughter, now drowned by his choices. Evans applied pressure from his cell, leaking more manipulated clips to the press, this time splicing my voice to suggest I'd provoked the scheme. A pattern interrupt. Martha intercepted me in the parking lot, her car idling, and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a letter from Lisa, written from protective custody, admitting she'd saved voice recordings of Evans threatening her if she didn't comply. The micro-twist. The recordings included Evans confessing to forging the judge's suicide note, a detail the police had missed. I slid into Martha's passenger seat, the leather cool against my skin, and knew this evidence could dismantle Evans's defense. The cliffhanger. As we drove off, my phone buzzed with an alert. David had awakened, and he was asking for me. From the quiet of my temporary apartment, lent by Martha, my goal was to visit David and hear his side, balancing a mother's love with the need for closure before the trial. The injustice was the hospital's sterile environment, where machines beeped like countdowns to a sentence I never wanted. I had to face him within the hour, before his lawyers or Evans's influence twisted his words. The cost was the visceral ache in my chest, the fear that seeing him broken might shatter my resolve. Evans applied pressure by having his allies spread rumors that I'd coerced Lisa's testimony, aiming to taint the jury pool. A pattern interrupt. The prosecutor called, urging me to delay the visit until after David's formal statement to authorities, but I insisted this was personal, not procedural. At the hospital, David lay pale, tubes snaking from his arms, and his first words were an apology, raw and stumbling. The micro-twist. He revealed Evans had promised to clear his debts only if he eliminated me, and David's suicide attempt was a failed escape from that pact, not just guilt. I held his hand, its warmth a ghost of the past, and knew I'd testify not for revenge, but for justice. The cliffhanger. As I left, the detective met me outside, his face grim. Evans had offered a full confession in exchange for immunity, implicating higher-ups, and the deal was being considered. Settled on Martha's veranda at dawn, a steaming coffee cup in my hands, my goal was to simply breathe, to find stillness after the storm, letting the legal wheels turn without my direct involvement. The injustice had been laid bare in court documents, but the personal toll lingered in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. I watched the sun rise, its light painting the garden in soft gold, and allowed myself to remember the good years before greed poisoned our roots. The cost was the permanent scar on our family tapestry, the threads of trust irreparably frayed, but also the unexpected strength I'd rediscovered in myself. Evans applied no pressure now, his fate sealed by his own confession and the mountain of evidence. The trial would proceed, but I was done being a pawn. A pattern interrupt. A cardinal landed on the railing, its red feathers vivid against the wood, and for a moment the world felt simple again. No schemes, no lies, just life enduring. The micro twist. I realized I hadn't taken my heart medication in days, not out of neglect, but because I no longer needed the pretense. My health was stable, and the fear had faded. I sipped the coffee, its bitterness a familiar comfort, and knew I'd rebuild from here, one quiet morning at a time. The cliffhanger. As the bird flew off, my phone lay silent, and for the first time in months, I didn't reach for it. I just watched the sky lighten, content in the solitude.